Drive a wedge between prospects and their existing advisors by taking the high road. Clients will open the door for you to enthusiastically engage with them as they question the merits of their existing advisor relationship.
This is The Rare Advisor, proud to be a part of the Advisor Advancement Network and home of a business model supercharged by recurring and repeatable events. Your host is Mike Walters, CEO of USA Financial. He is an investment advisor representative of and securities are offered through USA Financial Securities, member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
Hey everyone, welcome once more to The Rare Advisor. You will recognize my guest today again is Steve Phillips, a good friend and colleague. We go way back together, and on the previous discussion we had here on Rare, we got into the value proposition, which is another way to basically drive a wedge between an existing advisor and the prospect that you are potentially working towards bringing onto your firm. And it really is an interesting conversation about how to change the dynamics of that conversation. But also, along with that, you have to talk about the evolution in this industry that went from basically salesperson to broker to consultant. And Steve, I know you have plenty of thoughts about how that fits into this positioning. I'd love to have you kind of expand on some of this.
Thanks, Mike. And again, always good to be with you. And now that every time we kick it off and we're talking about how long we've been together, I think the lead in for us on Rare, it's got to be some kind of, I don't know if it's White Snake or some stuff back in the 80s. When I first got, we really need the proper lead in for our, so we'll get the team right on that. The reference back to the value proposition that advisors communicate to clients would directly connect to how do I position myself? What's the congruency between what I say I am and how I perform, how I interact with clients? So what I say I am, or how does my value proposition come across? And then how do I back that up? And so you mentioned the evolution of how financial services has evolved, continues to evolve. And so as we continue to coach and consult and speak with clients, what we find out is there are really three ways for any individual to participate in financial planning, for a generic term. The first one is kind of a DIY. It's do it yourself.
Right.
And we talk about robo-advisors and how that's become a thing. You know what's really interesting, Mike, that in the last year, as we have had some interaction with clients, while you and I and all of our colleagues at USA and around the industry could say robo, it's amazing how many clients have never heard the term. They don't know what robo means. Now, what they do know is artificial intelligence, and that there are advantages to doing that. And listen, let me say this. You mentioned very eloquently on our previous get-together that there's no bashing of the incumbent here. That's not the point. And even when I'm talking about robo or AI, I'm not saying not to do it. If it fits for you, fantastic. But there are a couple of things that we start to illustrate. Artificial intelligence is one thing. Emotional intelligence is another. So the benefit probably of AI or robo is right off the top is cost, no question. Now, it remains to be seen how effective robo is if we go through a monster crash, a big shutdown, issues in the market
Right.
where we really haven't had that, and what the response will be from clients and who jumps in on behalf of the robo. But that really is not even the biggest issue. The idea of, that we coach to around family, occupation, recreation, the whys around financial planning,
Right.
which completely every year evolve, all of those things. Robo and AI definitely don't provide that. So again, and you know what? We know that there's a lot of young people that participate in that. That's the time of their life, and it's less expensive, and I can kind of get my feet wet. Fantastic.
Well, and it's cost versus value.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you said that. The overarching theme for advisors in a very competitive environment, maybe not the single overarching, but a big one it is cost versus value. It is clients focusing on what you cost instead of what you're worth. And everything that we've done in our rare interviews together, and indeed in the coaching and consulting work that we do at USA Financial, really, you might say front and center, the whole value proposition is to have clients understand, hey, wait a minute, there is value there. And let's be honest, that people only focus on cost in the absence of tangible value. If I can't see what it's worth, and here's another thing, and you got me a little bit off the track, but a good track, that we know from talking to clients that they could care less what their advisor costs. Truly, if they're getting ongoing value and it's meaningful and it's tangible. We've actually had clients say, you know what, Mike Walters, he's my advisor. I know the value. I don't pay attention to what he costs. So it's a good point. The evolution of that then goes to brokers. And again, I don't hate that. There's a place, but this really is more a focus on salesmanship. And in our coaching and consulting, we talk about what? Products, pricing, and performance. And a couple of conversations have come to light over the last bit as we've talked to clients about this. We had one client share with us that, you know what? I just decided that I wanted a meeting with my advisor. And so I called him up and he said, yeah, fantastic. And made an appointment. And I went in there and it was laid out and it was great and it was beautiful. And then at the end of it, he was trying to sell me something else. And this client said, that really wasn't what I was after, but that wasn't what bothered me. So what bothered me is, why did I have to call and make the appointment? And what we said was, there is a lack of process. And so process that's definable really becomes a value to clients. And so that's a big difference with what we find in brokers and salespeople.
Well, there's a great line that you and your team teach, which is, when it's time for the client to have their pick your schedule, quarterly, semi-annual, annual review, whatever it is. And the line is or the positioning is essentially that, hey, we are going to conduct this review whether you're here or not. We would prefer your participation and we encourage you to come, but just understand that, if for whatever reason, be it pandemic or COVID, or you're out of town, or you don't like Zoom, or whatever the issue is, our team is still going to do the same work. We're still going to do that job on your behalf, whether you attend the event or not. Yeah. And that does such a good job of framing value, because again, to your point, most financial advisors are doing annual reviews simply because they think they're supposed to. And the client has no idea what their purpose is. They just view it as the advisor trying to stay in touch with them. And they don't realize that if you have a system and a process in place, that these are pertinent components of the ongoing planning process.
Well, you make a great point. And Mike, let me add a little phrase for you. We tell advisors, you're no longer doing annual review meetings. What you're doing are strategy and tactical meetings. Now think of, as a client, what that means. My review meeting, I know what happened last year. I got the statement. I see our performance and I see what you're charging me, and that's great. It's easy to blow that off.
Right.
The strategy and tactical meeting, this is your stuff. This is a look into the future. This is also issues around family, occupation, recreation. And those of you advisors that are participating with us here, and we're coming off a tough year. And some of it's continuing into 2021, a strategy and tactical meeting around the things that are most important to your clients. That's a big deal, and not something that a salesperson or a broker communicates. Right. And that leads us, Mike, then into what we call consultant. So where I said brokers are focused on salesmanship, a consultant is focused on stewardship. And it's not just, and that's not a throwaway word. This is not just stewardship of the money. This is stewardship of the relationship.
Sure.
And understanding and a commitment to process. And of course, when we are coaching, we're talking about, listen, I know that products, pricing, and performance, we're not naive. It's a big part of it's how we all grow our businesses. And it is something that we're accountable to our clients for. But what we tell advisors is, let's take a philosophical and emotional shift away from a focus on products, pricing, and performance to one of a philosophy, planning strategy, and a process. And indeed, and you just mentioned it, Mike, this is the third word is process, but all the other things are part of the process.
Right.
For an advisor to share with her clients that, look, we have an enlightened philosophy around all things financial. They include wealth management, they include risk management, tax planning, and so it goes. And we take a panoramic approach to that, and it's ongoing. Our planning strategy, look, if we've known this our whole careers, but if 2020 taught us anything, is that, your path and your life doesn't go like this. It goes like this, and it's like this, and it's over here, and then it's up. Guess what? Our planning strategy stays fluid and dynamic, just like your life does. And then finally, all of that is based in our proprietary process. Now, that is a consultative approach. And as you and I have said over and over and over, Mike, there is no bashing. Not only do we say don't bash the incumbent, none is needed.
Right.
None is needed.
Yeah.
If there's a shift away from products, pricing, and performance, and I'm talking about a philosophy and a planning strategy that moves along with your life based on the things that are important to you, family, occupation, recreation, it's pretty obvious then what the tangible value is. And I'll say it again. This is one of those things that your best clients turn around and talk about to other people. Right. Nobody wants to talk about the performance and the money and what it costs and all of that. And do you have this much? They want to talk about, my advisor has a process, and she includes everything is in there. And it's always, we have strategy and tactical meetings every year because things are changing and are updating, and the things that are updating are things that are important in our life. So it becomes pretty obvious that you are taking a stewardship approach rather than that of a salesperson. And again, makes a difference.
Yeah, and for people who have known me for a long time or are familiar with USA Financial, you realize that we've always talked about how do you create tangibility in this intangible environment called financial services. And one of the main ways to do that is you have to, in fact, name all of your services. And then what Steve and his team did is they kind of stepped in and said, yeah, that makes sense. But what happens is that makes sense when you're in front of the client. But then when you're not in front of the client, that's too much information. They can't remember all that. It's like asking someone to walk out of a restaurant and regurgitate back to you everything that was on the menu. Right. They don't have an ability to do that. So instead, what you're doing is you're taking the pieces that we've always taught, and now you're adding another layer on top, which is the process. And that process, that formula, if you will, now that needs to have tangibility. So we need to name that as well. So we name the process and the formula. That takes care of all the other subcomponents underneath it. The client can remember that one thing, that one process or formula, and now they're able to talk about you. So it all fits together.
Yeah, and you're right. It does all fit together, Mike, and they recognize that everything that can happen fits there. So my last thought for you connects to the first thought. The challenge, one of the big challenges for advisors in the industry today is a focus on what you cost, not what you're worth. Now, we've walked through AI, we've walked through broker, we're to consultant. Here's the thing now, that advisors, you can, in a very meaningful, understated way, communicate to clients that I don't negotiate my value. If pricing comes up in a conversation with a consultant, when you list out all the things you just said, Mike, about our process, all that it includes, and in part of the work that we do together is we have advisors really not for communication to clients, but for their own information and knowledge. How many things can you provide over the life of a relationship that then boil down into your process? And so with great confidence and sincerity, and it makes sense to clients, you can then say, look, we don't disrespect. There are other means to do business and to do your financial planning. But because of our approach, we don't negotiate our value. And we're able to list out all of the things that we can provide over the life of a relationship. Right. And as you mentioned, it all lives in one place. And so the idea of focusing on what you cost becomes a non-issue.
Right.
And the last thing, Mike, is amazingly cost and money and investable assets are the things that clients have told us over and over and over that they will not talk about to friends and family members.
Yeah.
But they will talk about a process and how it's different. So kind of comes full circle.
Just to kind of wrap things up, if you're listening to this and you're not familiar with USA Financial, you're not familiar with Protocol, which is the team within USA Financial that Steve heads up, and if you've ever lost a client because of your fees or anything else. So if you've ever lost a client because of a cost-related issue, this is going to solve all those problems. This is going to change all that. You're positioning your entire practice incorrectly. You need to reposition your practice. It's going to solve those problems, and you're going to have a much more enjoyable relationship with all of your clients moving forward. So I would encourage you, feel free to reach out. You know how to get a hold of us at USA Financial. Just ask any one of the business development people. They can get you in touch with Steve and his team. Thank you again, Steve, for taking the time, and stay tuned. We'll be back with more here on The Rare Advisor.
This information is for licensed financial professionals only and is not intended for use in soliciting sales from the public. The views expressed represent the opinions of the presenter or their featured guest, not necessarily those of USA Financial or its affiliated subsidiaries. Industry references are generic and not intended to represent actions or beliefs of any individual or entity. Content is only presented to illustrate general principles, beliefs, or ideas and should not be construed as legal or regulatory advice. Trademark and copyright protected. USA Financial and Affiliates.